I'm Marcy Lundy. Today is Tuesday, September 10th, 2024. And I'm so excited as this is the season premiere of season 5 of the Cult of Kindness podcast. I'm really excited to have a very special guest on today. Please welcome Michael O'Brien. Hello, Michael.
Hey, Marcy. I'm glad this is the season premiere. This is pretty awesome. I can't wait to
Yeah.
get into this with you. Yeah.
Yeah, you are the perfect guest to start off our season. So season 5 is about empaths, and just knowing and reading your story, I thought that one, it was a perfect fit, and two, I really like the layers of your story. On Cult of Kindness, it's all about being kind, but remembering to be good to ourselves. So there are a number of things that you do that aid in that. So I was hoping you could tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your story.
Yeah. So thanks again for having me on. I just love how you're putting ripples of kindness into the world. We definitely need it. Like kindness is that superpower that we can tap into. And to your point, we can or need to, or I don't want to say should, because we do a lot of shoulding in our life, but just it's helpful to remember to also be kind to ourselves.
Yes.
Sometimes I don't think we extend grace to ourselves like we have the potential to do so. So I love the fact that you share that in the work that you do.
Mhm.
So as a backstory, like who am I? I'll start that I'm a husband of 30 years to like an amazing woman. So we met in Washington, D.C. We have two daughters who have flown the nest, so we're on our own. One's near you in Denver, and one's still here on the East Coast.
Mhm.
I'm also a son and a friend and all that good stuff. And like the story that really like changed how I live is something I call my last bad day. So I was in New Mexico and I was at a company offsite meeting and I brought my bicycle out and I got hit head on by a Ford Explorer while I was out there. I was traveling 40 miles an hour, totally crazy. I remember all the sounds of that morning, just the energy of that day, getting knocked unconscious, regaining consciousness, being surrounded by emergency personnel, like all the different departments, state trooper, police, fire, ambulance, you name it, just total chaos, worst pain of my life. They had to medevac me to Albuquerque. The first surgery took 12 plus hours. Doctors told my wife, we're not really sure how your husband survived. Had he been 10 years older or not in shape, he would have died before he even got to the hospital. In fact, that's why they brought the state trooper in to the scene of the accident because they didn't think I was going to make it even to the helicopter.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
so you hear it, it's sort of this, I don't want to call it a classic story, but it can be like really common. Like we go away for work a lot or we go on travel. We might hug and kiss our loved ones goodbye and we have this notion that, all right, I'm just going to go away and I'll come back. When are you coming home? It's on the calendar.
Yeah.
And I had done that thousands of times up until that moment. And each time I always came home and I
Mhm.
almost didn't like that week in July in 2001. And so saying goodbye at the airport now is a huge deal for us, just that whole notion because you know, not to be morbid, but you just don't know when will be the last time you see someone who is special in your life, like your kids or your partner or friends. And so all what I went through really underscores that.
Right.
And so I came out of that surgery. I went into the ICU for several days, came out of the ICU, and the doctor painted a pretty grim picture of like what my life was going to be. And
Mhm.
instead of being like happy I survived, I was really pissed off at the world. I was so angry. And I wanted to get back at the driver. And I was frightened because I didn't know what was going to become of my life. Would I be able to keep my job? Like, how could I be a husband, a father, all that jazz. Like all that went through my mind. And when you're in the hospital, you have a lot of time to ruminate and a lot of stories are created. And eventually I got to a point where a mentor shared with me, hey, you can look at this accident any way you want. He went on to say that everything in your life is neutral until you decide to label it. So, you know, you can look at this a lot of different ways. You can look at this as you're the victim and no one's going to argue with you because right
Mm.
now you're a mess,
Right.
or you can see it differently. And, to make a long story short, I spent some time thinking about like, well, is that true? Like, is everything neutral until you label it? And I believe it is true
Yeah.
that we have space before we label things. And I decided to call the day my last bad day because if I have people in my life who I love and they love me back, when I
Right.
go to bed each night, I can't call the full day, the full one, a bad one. It's too
Mm.
binary. So I've had bad moments. I've had challenging moments. I've had moments that are unkind. And
Yeah.
maybe I wasn't even kind. I've had all those, but when I go to bed each night, again, if I have people in my life who I love and they love me back, then I can't call the full day a bad day. And through that, I found gratitude and mindfulness, which we'll get into, but just the whole act of kindness, like putting intentional acts of kindness out into the world as a
Yes.
way to help us heal. And I took my health for granted before all this. And
Mm.
then I realized like the healing process really has to come from your heart. It's empathy, it's compassion, it's love, and it's kindness. And today I try to spread that message out to people wherever
Right.
they happen to be, like in communities and also in corporations, because I just think it's the superpower that we all need to tap into.
Absolutely. On your website, it's written that you said, I was chasing happiness and thought if I caught it, I will have made it. And this was pre-accident, I understand. Uh, and you said that chasing happiness is a stressful pursuit. That it is. And I think people fail to realize like the happiness is just simply picking a flower or something that simple, you know. Um, on your healing journey, how long was that process post accident, and how did you keep your head above water, so to speak?
Yeah, I love that you pointed to the whole chasing happiness thing. You know, there are moments where I actually caught the happiness. I got the new thing, the
Yeah,
car, got the job promotion, and then whoop, like it vanished. It flew away, the happiness, and I went back to chasing.
yeah,
And to your point, yeah, like happiness is an inside out kind of affair. And that's what I had to discover through my healing journey. And the journey of healing, like it takes some time. A lot of people would come to me and say, hey, are you normal? Are you back to normal? You back at it? And I think really what they wanted me to say was, yes, I'm normal again. And now you don't have to sit in this uncomfortableness that I also sit in. I,
yes,
I also think it came from a caring place in their heart. Obviously, they wanted me to be healthy and they were interested in my well-being. But I think
mhm,
a lot of people like want to go back to normal because if you're not normal, there's something amiss, if you will. And that can
yes,
be really uncomfortable and it's hard to sit in that discomfort.
definitely,
So it took me about 13 months to get back on the bike again, but it took me years to really like mend. And there's some healing I'm still doing. There was nerve damage through my left leg, so I can tell that even those nerves have a way of continuing to repair over time. Maybe
right,
not as quickly as once before, but I also had so many different surgeries. So I had the initial day of the accident or the crash,
sure,
and then 13 other surgeries. And so those all required some healing. In fact, in 2021, I had a total knee replacement, something that they thought I would need 5 years after the accident. But because of the way I was living, I got 20 years out of that one knee. So I 4X their predictions, which I will take. But that was a healing process. So I think the healing process for me continues even 20 plus years away from the accident.
Mm.
And, but the initial phases of it, like I was in the hospital for about close to 4 months. That's when it was super intense. And I was going through all the different feels that you would expect and really wondering, like, who will I become? And, through the whole thing, I realized, well, I can become anyone I want to be. And the really cool thing I've learned through aging is that you can reinvent yourself at any point in time. And that is really liberating. You don't have to stay static or just the same. You can recreate yourself whenever you wish, although it
Sure.
does take some courage to do so.
That's very true. Uh, my husband, when he was 14, had a diving accident and became a quadriplegic. And so uh, we've been together 15 years. So reading about your experience, I definitely see connections with his experience. And he was saying like the first 3 months, he just was in bed, just there. And I was wondering if for you, where you were corporate and doing wonderfully well, that time frame where you're just sort of sitting or laying and, you know, thinking, did you happen to find like a sense of zen come over you that perhaps you weren't expecting?
Well, in the beginning, Marcy, there was no Zen, just a
Mm.
lot of great grief.
Yeah.
There was some anger and a lot of those different emotions, but I can relate to some of what your husband went through. Obviously, we had different injuries, and once I started getting my bearings back, I realized that a second here or there, I might have, ended up paralyzed or may not have made it at all. And so that's when gratitude started to come into my life. And so, to your point, though, the first 3 months I'm in my hospital bed, I cannot put weight on my legs. I'm just in the hospital bed or in a wheelchair, and
Mm.
I need help doing almost everything from showering to going to the bathroom to getting dressed. I can't make my own bed, like all that stuff. So, what I felt in the early phases of my recovery was just a loss of dignity. So, here I was, a 33-year-old father, husband, leader at work. I had this job, like I thought I was doing fairly well. And
Yeah.
then it was all stripped down, and I felt like I lost all my dignity, and it basically was just lying there naked except for a hospital gown.
Right.
So it took me some time. It really took me until I discovered the power of a mindfulness practice to say, okay, like now I can get into some, I can find some space, because in the beginning, everything's it's really wild because everything's sort of coming at you and everyone has a point of view as to what you should do to get better quickly.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
there's like all this stuff and it feels so fast, but at the same time, you're not going anywhere because you're in a hospital bed.
Yeah.
So it's spinning out of control all around you, but then you're stuck. And with a practice of mindfulness, when I began, what I found is it helps slow the game down, slow life down, and
Right.
create some space. And in that space, then I started to feel moments of like calm and zen and tried to find clarity. And that helped me go forward. Yeah.
Very good. The reason I thought I'd ask that is because I know that ultimately you created Pause, Breathe, Reflect. And I was wondering if that downtime, if you will, sort of got you going in that direction.
Well, so the direction to go to pause, breathe, reflect was really a moment in physical rehab when I was still in the hospital.
Mm.
All I wanted to do was to come back home. I wanted to get home.
Yeah.
I wanted to get home to like familiar smells, like my wife's bread baking in the oven, or sounds of my kids, or just the smells of your house and the sounds. And even the annoying creaks that your house makes, like how everyone has like maybe a different way of walking down the stairs and you can tell who's walking down the stairs by their walk, like that type of stuff. I
Sure.
also wanted a sense of quiet because when you're in the hospital, it's not quiet. It's almost impossible to heal and to recover because there's so much going on and they're poking at you and the whole shebang. So I
Mm.
was having this moment. I want to come back home. I want to get back home. And I knew enough as an athlete from my youth that the breath helps slow things down. So when I felt like overwhelmed and things were going too quickly, I was like, okay, remember your breath. You can do a breath work pattern before they called it breath work. So I
Mm.
did a box breathing pattern, and that was the beginning of my practice. So I did it one morning in a quiet place in the hospital, and I was like, okay, I sort of had a good day that day. So I was like, I'm going to do it again tomorrow. And then, kept on doing it. And then I furthered my study once of mindfulness and meditation once I left the hospital. And I went back to my corporate life with this like little secret weapon, if you will,
Sure.
in my back pocket. But I didn't tell anyone because I had this big job. And this is the early 2000s. So this is before the internet as we know it.
Yeah.
And so we don't like how are we learning back then about books? But like mindfulness wasn't talked about in a positive way back then. It was like, that's a little weird or that's a little
Yeah.
hippie
Yeah.
thing. And so I just kept it to myself. And what I found was as my fellow executives were all running around, squirreling all around, chasing bones and all that stuff, or squirrels or what have you.
Right.
I could play a different game. I could play it at a different pace and actually get more stuff done because I was less reactive and just a little bit more thoughtful about making decisions. Then we fast forward to the pandemic. So now I'm like furthering my study to become a teacher and even further, and just my practice is evolving. When the pandemic hit, I was like, all right, Michael, like this, whether you believe in Mother Earth, universe, or God, I call that my mug. Like the grand barista in the sky, whoever fills up your mug.
That's
So
good.
yeah, so whoever fills up your mug, I was like, I think they're trying to tell us something here. Like we need to slow down, and you know, COVID hit our respiratory system. Like, plus we had all those wildfires. There was like so much happening in the world that was
Yeah.
really attacking our breath.
True.
And I was like, I think they're trying to tell us to slow down and breathe. And
Mm.
in a moment of reflection, really think about, hey, people down there, think about how you guys are doing this thing called life.
True.
So when I was in the hospital, I called these pause, breathe, reflect breaks because it was short for PBR. And I thought I was being clever because there's a beer with those same initials. And I thought, I'm being funny. Um, I don't think anyone really got the joke too much except for me. But really, like when it came to the pandemic, I was like, this is a moment for us to all pause. And in some ways, we stopped,
Yes.
take a breath, reflect. Like, how, like your guys are going to come out of this, but how do you want to come out of it? Like, how do you want to live differently? Which I
Yeah.
don't think we've really done. This commentary,
Yeah.
we sort of just tried to rush back to like normal or try to catch up, which is such a shame.
It's
And so
true.
I started leading live meditation 4 times a day just to help people through the pandemic. And then by doing that, I was like, why am I doing it on a social media platform? We can just create an app and
Mm.
have our own community that's safe, that's brave, that's truly belonging. And it doesn't have all that gunk that social media has, because we
Love
can have like standards as far as how we'll interact with each other. So I created my Pause, Breathe, Reflect app as I rode my bike across the country in 2022 that's filled with a whole bunch of great practices. And we also do a live practice multiple times a week
it. Mm.
because I really wanted to give people a sense of community. I just didn't want to have an app where someone was by themselves with their phone because we have enough of that in the world.
Yes.
And not everyone comes to the live practices, but I wanted to at least create a container, if you will, that if you want to come together and be together with like heartedness as opposed to like mindedness, we have something for you so you can know like we're all going through stuff. And if we can find a way to come together, despite our differences, then we can figure this out and be a little bit more thoughtful and definitely much more kind to one another.
That's beautiful, Michael. You're right. There are so many apps that are supposed to offer clarity. But like you said, you're just by yourself looking, oh, it says to do this now. So how great to have those live sessions. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's also, we use AI to help people search for a meditation,
Hmm.
but when people get the app, they actually like get me.
Good.
So it's not there's not an AI model telling you to meditate or telling you advice. Like, and I know AI can be really beneficial. Again, we have it as part of our search feature on our app so people can find a meditation quickly. But
Okay.
what we I think what we thirst for is just what's authentic, what's real today. Like and so when we what I try to do is make meditation and mindfulness real. Like it's like relatable and practical. And we can do this. All it does is take a minute of time, a couple minutes, and you can feel the energy when we're together. So it's real. As opposed to right now, I think a lot of us are maybe scrolling or looking on another app and be like, is this legit? Is this real? And it comes from a place we start to distrust like what's around us, and at a time where we need to find a way to come together.
That's true.
And I want to try to do all that I can to help us come together, despite where we happen to live or how we vote or who we love or how much money we make or the color of our skin. Or just like we got to find a way to like Marcia, like I hear you, I see you, and I love you. Like
Yeah.
we'll just start there, and then then we can talk about the other things as we go from that point.
Oh gosh, yes, it's so true. You're speaking my language. Can you tell me a little bit about the pause, breathe, reflect way?
Yeah, so it's built. So I'm formally trained on a 45-minute a day practice,
Okay.
which comes from mindfulness-based stress reduction, which John Kabat-Zinn brought from the East and was part of the University of Massachusetts Medical Center, almost like mindfulness is medicine. And
Okay.
so I have a background in healthcare, so that appealed to me. And it's rigorously studied, like some great studies around the value of mindfulness,
Okay.
which is fantastic. But I also know like the people I'm trying to reach and connect with, 45 minutes a day is a big ask. Now, a lot of people nowadays are like, man, I don't even have like 10 minutes in the morning. And so what I found over time, and this is really coming out of my recovery,
Yeah.
was instead of taking big chunks of my recovery, I tried to break it down into bite-sized pieces. So my feeling is if you don't have 10 minutes in the morning to meditate, that's cool. I bet you have 5 times throughout the day where you have 2 minutes.
Yes.
So I tried to skew it towards shorter practices. So if someone's like, I meditate 3 times a month, or I only meditate when things are stressful, I'm like, well, that's better than nothing. But what I would rather see you do is practice at a shorter duration, but do it consistently throughout the month and
Hmm.
make this a way of living. So if you only have a minute each day for 30 days, I will take that over 3 times a month where you do 10 minutes.
I love
Because what I'm trying to help people do is take meditation off the cushion or maybe their yoga practice off the mat and make it a way of living. Like
it.
we're gonna we're gonna do shorter practices throughout the day, so then we can regulate, let go of stress, find that moment to be grateful. Because I think we've all been there. We have a morning routine. Our morning routines are amazing now. We do so much in the morning, but then by 11 a.m., like a curveball's thrown at us, and then we lose the practice. So I'm trying to let's just weave it in bite-sized pieces, really relatable. So then
Mhm.
you can be consistent, and then it becomes a habit, a healthy habit, and then it just becomes, no, this is just what I do,
That's good.
and I can do it anywhere. I can do it in Midtown Manhattan. I could do it at the Denver airport, which I have done before in both places. I don't have to be at a fancy spa or this great mountaintop in the Himalayas. I can practice mindfulness anywhere I happen to be.
Right. And that's so important. I think some people don't bother because they're like, oh, I don't have what time they think they need. And it's like, no, you just need that break. Like you said, the breath work is so important. It's easy to get there.
It's so easy, and that's what we're trying to do, is like make it practical, almost demystify it, because I think so many people feel like, well, I got to make my mind go blank. That's not true. Or I have to be in a certain position, lotus or cross-legged. That's not true. I have to make it like all quiet and pristine, like a spa, like Spirit Rock out in California. Also not true. Although it's a really awesome place to go if you can make it
Sure.
there. Um, and so you can do this practice. You know, we have practices while you're doing the dishes, while you're charging up your EV vehicle,
Yeah.
you know, just like all these like everyday moments, just to
Yes.
check in, drop in, notice your breath. We take over 20,000 breaths a day, but we don't necessarily notice any of them. So just 1 minute, you could take five really perfect breaths in 1 minute and
Mm.
just feel that. And then just, you know what, you just down regulate, the heartbeat goes down a bit. And then you've created some space. And in that space, you can be really intentional about how you're going to show up next. And that puts that puts a good ripple into the world.
So good. Yeah. Thank you for that. So, as I said, our season 5 is about the empath and your story and your journey after the cycling accident. I thought, well, this book is spot on for, people who maybe aren't empaths to understand, because just the process is very easy to comprehend. You take us through your peaks and valleys. And so
Yeah.
the book of the month for September will be Michael O'Brien's book, Shift, Creating Better Tomorrows, Winning at Work and in Life. And Michael, if you could tell the audience a little bit about the book and the process and motivation behind it.
Yeah. So thanks for highlighting it as the book of the month. That's really, it's just such an honor. So like, yeah, like a lot of gratitude. So thank you. So the book brings people into that day of the accident, a little bit of, you know, who I was before the accident, and then the journey we went on really for the next 13, 14, 15 months from the time of the accident to the time I got back on the bike. And in a lot of ways, like I didn't tell my wife this, but like when people read it, they're like, man, your wife is really amazing, because there's like letters from my wife to our friends and community. And just, I wanted to highlight like her strength and her commitment to us as a couple and us to the family. So I wanted something that my girls could read and be like, yeah, mom's really cool. Like, mom was like, dad was sort of laid up, but mom like kept everything together. And when
Yeah.
people read the book, I think they pick up on that, because, you know, I'm like my wife's biggest cheerleader. I think she's incredible on so many fronts, but she like really got into mama bear mode when, like, you know, like, and you need that, right? You need that in life. Like you need people that when things are down, like who's going to be like mama bear or papa bear to like help pull things through. And so, you know, so for me, it was also part therapy to write the book. You know, we hear all the time now on podcasts or like through social media about better help and therapy. And but back
Yeah.
then, like therapy wasn't like as prominent or maybe as accepted as it is today.
Yeah.
And so I never really went through formal like talk therapy. So writing about this and taking all my journal entries, because I was doing a whole bunch of journal entries in my like poor penmanship, which was even worse because of all my injuries,
Oh
and
no.
took it all in because there was a story there. And, you know, just the whole process of putting the story together and working with a really good editor to help tell the story was therapeutic. I got a lot of stuff that I was holding on to out and sharing it with other people because we're all going to go through hard things, and hopefully no one has to go through something as hard as I went through or as hard as your husband's gone through. But we can pull from each other's stories because ultimately I think all of our stories are embedded in each other.
That's true.
And when we see that, we're like, oh yeah, you too, you went through like something hard, and it's not the same story, but like we can be like, yeah, like I went through that too, and then it gives us a chance to connect
Yeah.
in a very relatable way, even though we might come from different backgrounds. So, yeah,
Yeah.
the book was such a wonderful project, and again, a little bit of it like an open love letter to my wife.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Yeah. Like I said, what better way to understand and get in touch with your empath nature than to read your story?
Yeah.
And it's funny you say that because I can be a mother bear, but for my husband, it just shows like go mode. Let me help you. And then he's like, well, can you press my face as you're, tending?
That's awesome.
To take care of you.
Yeah. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just, and I was the type of guy who didn't, pretty typical guy. I didn't want to ask for help. I
Yeah.
had a notion of like what it meant to ask for help. Like you weren't strong. You weren't like a
Yeah.
man. Like,
Yeah.
like the whole cliche, like men never ask for directions. But now they don't have to because there's like Google Maps and Apple Maps, but I I always thought of myself as like I'm going to be the one helping other people. I'm going
Yeah.
to be the one providing, doing the corporate job, the whole thing. And here I was stripped of all that, and I needed help desperately. And it took a lot of effort for me to get comfortable asking for help. I realized that it wasn't a sign of weakness. It was more of a statement of, I'm not done yet. I need a boost. I need a little help. I'm not quitting. I just need a little support. And it's not because I'm weak. It's just because what we're trying to climb is a pretty tall mountain and I can't do it alone.
Oh, yes. Yes. And it's so interesting the journey life takes us on. You're fortunate to have this one experience, and then little did you know you'd have an accident, and then it takes you into this other beautiful experience where you help so many.
Yeah, it's really incredible. Like I was talking to someone last week and I said, we would have never met if like our crazy stories never occurred. Like she had a crazy story growing up outside of LA, in a completely different world than where I grew up living in suburban Rochester, New York. And we both went through our challenges and our trauma at certain ages.
Mm.
And then, yeah, the universe, the wild road system of the universe brought us together. And I really don't believe that, we probably would never have met if we never went through what we went through. And I'm so grateful that like I'm connected to her now. And now I'm connected to you. Like
Yeah.
without my accident, without the crash, like we probably never meet. And I just think, yeah, when I look back on that, there's like so much goodness that's come out of something that was so hard and so horrific. And I don't want anyone to go through the pain, as I mentioned earlier, that I went through. But boy, when I look at it, like there's so much that opened up for me. I am forever grateful that I decided to take that path to see myself differently from all this because I could have easily looked at myself as a victim and no one would have judged me for doing so.
That's so true. That's so true. Another set of words that you had written down: consider me as someone who can support you at any moment. And I mean, that's just like a hug for everyone. I mean, and they're not just words that actually feel sincere in having this conversation with you and knowing that you offer these live sessions on your app. I feel as though you literally are.
I, yeah, I do. Maybe too. Like the chagrin of sometimes of my wife and my kids and stuff like that. But I think they see this work as a calling for dad. And I, I know what it feels like to not feel like you're part of something. Like, and I think there's, research is pretty clear. I think the Surgeon General even pointed out that loneliness is a big epidemic in our country here in the US. And I think we thirst for belonging. And we got to find a way to minimize the othering, the us versus them that we do. And so if I can, in my way, like really to those words, like if you have a moment, like I tell people all the time, like if you have a moment, like reach out. Like I'm only a phone call away, I'm a text message away. And when you reach out, going back to what we talked about earlier, like you're going to get me.
Yeah.
You're not going to get an AI bot version of me. Like
Yeah.
it's going to be like, there's going to be a human that's perfectly imperfect with a heartbeat and his share of worries too on the other side. And as two humans, we're going to try to figure this thing out. And I, again, I welcome AI. I think AI is going to be a game changer in many aspects of society, but nothing will ever replace human to human, energetic, connection. That's who we are. And it touches our soul. And at least for right now, AI doesn't have a soul. And, I know it's sexy to like do all this AI stuff, but man, I think the sexiest thing to do is just like flaws and all like come together and figure this out and put a little bit more joy and kindness into the world.
I'm with you there.
And
All
we're
right.
at such a beautiful moment in society that we can do that. So I think it's like I'm pretty pumped about where we are. Yeah.
So am I. Yeah. Like you said, in 2020, it was basically like, look, we all need to slow down, sit down, get it together, and connect with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can see that we still have things to solve
Yeah.
and we can still be joyful.
Yes. And that
We
is
can
the
do both. We can do both at the same time. Like
right.
being joyful doesn't mean we're complacent and we're not seeing the problems that we face. We can do both. And
Yes.
that's why I'm so excited about like the period of time that we're living in. Like we can do both.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to encourage people to step into that and do both and put good ripples into the world.
Same here. We definitely are simpatico there. Now, Michael, I must admit that I bought the last copy of your book on Amazon, or so it told me there was one left, and I got it. But
Yeah, I think Amazon does that to like try to
oh,
like put
so like I better.
scarcity in the system. There are more books. There are more books. But I think they're playing with us, I think, a little bit. They're like, there's only one left to make sure you order it right now. But yeah, there's a few more books out there.
Okay, that's a good thing because, like as I said, that is our book of the month for September: Shift, Creating Better Tomorrows, Winning at Work and in Life. So, aside from Amazon, Michael, where can people find your book?
So they can find the book at like independent bookstores. They can order a copy. So there's some good ones all around the country. They can order an autographed copy of the book directly from me. All they have to do is go to either michaelobrienshift.com or pause, breathe, reflect, and I will send you a little note with the book so you can find the book that way as well.
Nice, perfect. Well, Michael, thank you for kicking off season 5. I think this is just the perfect way for us to be in this Cult of Kindness empath journey. You are a light, and I'm thankful for you, and I'm sure many others are as well.
Well, thank you so much, Marcy. You're doing great work. And as we talked about before we hit record, it would be great to meet in person now that my oldest lives out in Denver. That'd be awesome.
I would love that. Yes, and again, thank you so much for the shirt. I love it, and you could autograph my copy of the book.
Yes, absolutely. So we'll try to make that happen. So again,
Yes,
thanks for having me on. I appreciate you.
sure thing. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I love you all, and thank you again, Michael. Take care.